is February 11th, and the world is looking like hell. But anyway, this is going to be a start, I guess, of a continuation of a series of videos that I'm going to do about history that leads up to America, who we are as Americans, how we got founded to be who we are, and how it relates to history, and still to this day, that same history, and how it's dominating the direction our future's heading in. When we, it seems hard for people to realize where it all begins, and I'm just going to do a brief up to the point to getting to America, because without understanding a brief of pretty much history and how we got to the establishing of America, it kind of makes it hard to understand who we are. So let's just start with a brief of where it begins, and it begins with the human journey, as far back as what we know. I've been studying world history, cultures, religions, ideology, theologies, and what have you, since I was a young kid. So probably, in all honesty and truth, right now, it would be about, 40 years, actually more than that. It'd be almost 47 years. Yeah. So, and in it, really, I'm not somebody who went and, to college for history. It was all my own self-study, started when I was a really young kid. And so it's not an indoctrinated view of world history to me. It's my own view. And it's not even my own view. It's how I was disciplined in my learning to take the view of what I only cared about, the truth. The truth, because I found in history, like Albert Einstein says, in his perspective view, everybody's got a different view, and I'm going to just give you some things to consider about when we're looking at history. And I'm going to do this as brief as I can. I'm going to try and understand that, you're going to have an attention span to pay attention, because I know today with the way things move, everybody's like 5 seconds and done. But it's going to take some time, and really, I guess this is only going to reach the people who are really concerned and care. Those who are in the minute and that's it, they'll fade away, and they're the problem in this world right now, because they don't have an attention span of that of a damn match light. You know what I mean? But anyway, what it is, to understand what I'm saying about history and what have you, when we look at history and we try to understand how it evolves and where it's going, it all starts with understanding how to view history. Like, I'm talking about perspective. Albert Einstein had this perspective view. He said, I'll give an example. That's where I was going. And mind you, too, some of this is, I get an idea of what I want to do, and this is not a rehearsed thing. I don't have a script, so, if I'm hesitating, I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going. Okay, back to Albert Einstein's theory of his perspective view. Let's say a guy gets hit by a car, right, in the center of a street, and, it's right on a city block. Now, you got a witness on the right side corner, left side corner, cross the street, right side corner, cross the street, left side corner. All four of those people are going to have a whole totally different perspective of their view of that accident. The guy who is up on the right-hand corner, if he was watching the accident and he witnessed it, he's going to see the guy get impacted and hit. The guy down in the left corner is going to say, well, I don't know, I just heard screeching and this, and I heard a thud. I couldn't see who got hit. And the guy on the other side is going to say, well, I seen a midsection of a guy walking in the street, then boom, he disappeared. I heard a thud. You see how everybody has a different perspective by their view. And the same holds true with history. And when I was younger and trying to understand history, I was lucky in that I came across good librarians that gave me good direction on how to go about my wanting to learn the things I did. Like one told me that if you want, and this is something we can understand, this is how my perspective of history went. Because in reading history, I found, like they say, the victor gets the spoils and the victor gets to write the history. And of course, all victors of history and world rising and falling of empires and nations are going to favor themselves as the story to make themselves out to be the heroes or what have you. And in life, you're going to find there's always two sides to every story, and then there's somewhere in between the truth. And the truth is all I ever cared about. So with defining the truth, I was given direction as a young kid, and I followed that direction because it was good. It was good, solid direction. It was that if you're studying a certain thing of history and a culture or something in the world or even the United States or what have you, and you want to know if the story you're reading is the truth, look around the people who would be impartial to that story, not related to that story, no association to that story, but may have been witness to what the events were happening. and then see what their history says. Like, for instance, when you're reading ancient history and you're looking at, say, the Canaanites and the issues going on with the Hebrew and the Egyptians and whatever in ancient history, and you say, wow, did that event really happen? Was there really Canaanites? Were there really Philistine? Was there really this? Was there really that? Well, there's a lot of history and a lot of records of ancient history. Written records can be traced back to about 13,000 years. Beyond that point, it's pictorial, and what we do have is scattered. Not much of it really has survived the harshness of time. But with what we do know, we can get a pretty good perspective. And what we find from that of information relating to people outside and around areas, we get a lot of information that can either verify or, like for instance, let's say somebody says something happened in ancient Egypt. You start looking around ancient Egypt history and you stumble across other tribal people that lived around that area and had villages set up or communities set up in that area, and you see nothing in their history about this event. You go to the other side of Egypt, you go to the east, and you look over the tribal people there in their history, you see nothing about that event. You go to north and south, nothing about that event. You look around outside even further to them, the other rising empires, the dynasties of China and the emperors of China, and you look into their history, see if they speak of this event, nothing about that event. No, more than likely, when you can't find a trace of evidence in anybody's history about an event, it's an exaggerated lie, and because there's no evidence of it. So, it could be mythical. And the thing today, what we don't realize, and which I've realized in studying history, that, humanity and its human nature hasn't changed much. We think today we are the it of what it is. And in the modernization of everything that we have in this world, and all the advancements of technology we have, and how far we've gone in that advancement, that we travel into space and what have you now, all those things are of great change that are in the evolution of our evolving into a more intelligent and able species. I guess we're the dominant species clearly of this planet, and but the one thing that doesn't change is human nature. It's inherent. It's a natural. There's a natural constant balance of who we are, and who we are no different than anything else in the animal kingdom of the worlds. Outside, we're the dominant of intelligence. We do have that ability, but we can also be as stupid as we are intelligent, depending on what we have access to. And that's where it goes to. And the other thing we have to realize, like I mentioned Albert Einstein, today we know of Thomas Jefferson, Albert Einstein, Tesla, even Henry Ford, many people were geniuses of our time that we know of. And we don't consider the fact that there was probably geniuses all throughout world history. And you had humane geniuses who were, had humanity about them and didn't have evil intent. And then clearly you had evil intent geniuses. In my view, when I look back in ancient history and I see the rising of how things evolved, and you really indulge into the study of it as deep as I did, you start to realize that it was the evil geniuses who are the cause of all evil in this world. These were men who could look out, and just give you an example. Imagine you're an evil genius during the time of the Hebrew, right? And we're just going to click along here and go. The ancient Hebrew, right? And you look around and you see all these people, and you realize all these people are trying to figure out, how the hell did we get here? What are we doing on here? What is here? Who are we? Who put us here? Everybody's trying to figure it out. And this genius guy's got this incredible ability to reason, rationalize things, and comprehend things. And he sees the confoundment in humanity. And he doesn't care about where he came from, because he's a genius. He's already understood that he has no recollection of being anywhere before he was born or who he is now. And he doesn't waste his mind. He's a genius. He doesn't waste his energy on things he knows he can't understand. He may seek a higher understanding in his own subconscious, but he's not playing that game of idiocy. But he plays that game of looking out at the people and realizing, you know what? These people are idiots, and I can manipulate and control them, because he can recognize the patterns of their emotion. And he understood, give them what they're asking for. Give them what they're asking for. They want answers. Give them answers. Answers that he, as a genius, can confound them with. That would make, like enlightening stuff, He says a lot of smart things. And his intent is evil. His intent's to control these people. And, as time progresses, we realize it's these evil geniuses who have come up with the many different things, which gets into, like, not so much the ancient Jews of the Hebrew. They sought a higher conscience and awareness through that of a one single energy of all-powerful God. And, this is a natural, inherent instinct within humanity. And it seems that when you look at humanity and its progress, you realize that even in the destructive nature of, like, they claim an ice age, okay? So let's say the ice age happens. Now everybody's whatever, and they come back. But you see what? They come back with a natural, inherent instinct to seek a God. And this is something inherent in us that is of natural occurrence. So and in truth, when you look at things, you realize there is an order of a great power that has organized the world and the evolution of humanity and created all these things. To deny that is idiocy in itself. There is obviously a God, and God would be the supreme energy of all power, of all creation, the source of it. That's God. And God is in control of it all. And I would say that's self-evident by the fact of understanding that the process continues. You see, if God no longer existed, then the process would no longer exist. The controller of it, the planter of the seeds, the mender of the wounds, the organizer of its process of cause and effect. God is in the power of all those things. And, it's obvious and self-evident that if God is the commander of all things and the order of all things, if the commander and order of it all dies, then all things die with it. That's just the way it would be. That's a natural, it's common sense. It would go into chaos, total chaos, and implode, right, or collapse, or whatever. It just couldn't exist without something keeping chief in order. You know what I'm saying? So with that, we're going to just progress forward. Now, you get the mindset of people with now the evil intent becomes like, when we get into now, we move away from the one God theory. I'm just doing this quickly. I'm trying to get, then we get to the Egyptians. Now, ancient history is important, and some people may be saying, well, what the hell does all this have to do, Jim, with now in America? Understand, when I tell you that by the end of this series, you're going to realize that the very process and method of what is decaying our nation starts here in Egypt. Believe it or not, it starts here with evil geniuses. Men who, when you break down the hieroglyphics, and I did this as a kid back when I remember when they found Egypt, the Egyptian, they found King Tut's tomb and all, and they had in the Smithsonian Institute, they brought it into New York City for a display, and you had to pay $2 to go in and see all this stuff. And later on, there was parts of what they found in areas that were totally not related to Egypt, but they didn't know. Archaeologists and scientists and what have you, they have what's called hypothetical theory. And under hypothetical theory, that is whatever the so-called, quote, experts, say is fact until something of evidence appears to prove their facts to be wrong. So take that with a grain of salt and understand that. And like I say, these people have vivid imaginations like children. So everything they were finding, they were just conglomerating it together and putting it all in, and they did their little display, because it was really all about how much money can we make, displaying this stuff, and how much can we sell it to somebody for in a museum. That is all motivated by greed. So the story gets slapped together, however it is, for the most quickest production to be able to generate the quickest amount of money to make everybody happy and get everybody rich. And so they do it. But in that display, I can remember they had this one area was laid out with all these stone tablets, and they were all in like hieroglyphics. And I said to the guy, I said to him, what are all those things? And he said, oh, these were tablets, and they had a little story about an area where they excavated and they found this foundation, and all these things were underneath in these like underground rooms, and these were these tablets, right? Later they would find out that would be called the foundation of Babylon. It had nothing to do with Egypt. But anyway, these tablets, I wanted to know what they said. And they told me that, it's going to take a while for them to, and whatever. But I knew people in New York. I was a nerd. And I knew people in Washington, D.C. And I knew people that if I had images of these things, they could probably connect me with somebody over there that could do the hieroglyphic interpretation of where I could actually read these tablets. Well, it was going to be an expensive process. Mind you, I was a shoeshine kid then, but I did have ability to make money. And it cost me several $100s to get everything I wanted. I had to pay the museum guy for actual Xeroxing copies of these things that they would do for me. It was like, 2 cents a copy. And then I had to take the copies, send them to a guy who would send them over across, and then they would do this process where they kind of take the image of the tablet here, and then over here they break it down in English for me what it's saying. Now I expected to get back like mythical stories like Moses and things like this, but I didn't get that back. What I got back was an order, a structure, like a direction being given to the Pharaoh's children of how to keep the kingdom in order, how to keep the people doing what they're doing, how to control things, how to maintain the order of Pharaoh, it was like the rule book of how to rule Egypt by the pharaohs passing down to their children. It was the guidance book of those of the elitists who would only have privileged knowledge to be able to read these things. And I realized, I was like, oh my God, look at it. And it even had, that's what I'm saying, I was broken up between the tablets I took. They kind of broke up, but they kind of broke up in a way, I guess it just fell in place because it gave me an idea of the actual order. They had the beginning pharaohs and how, and I realized too later in in-depth study that the whole experiment was actually encouraged by a Babylonian, which most people don't realize. Babylonians existed before Egypt, though archaeologists want to argue it. There's fact of evidence, in my opinion, that shows that these people had more of an ability of understanding human nature and manipulating people than anybody. And they were using Egypt. Actually, Egypt rose to what it is by the manipulation of what was known as a small tribal group of the Babylonians. What they did was they used Egypt in the sense so that if things failed, they would be the ones to take the brunt of it, not them, and they would look for another sucker somewhere down the line. So with that order, what I'm getting to is that order of the rise of the pharaohs of Egypt is where we see the first presentation of the demigod. And then when you look at the order and the structure of how Egypt's pharaohs formed their kingdom, you get the order of what today still exists and how they do it in controlling society. You see, these guys were evil geniuses. They could look out and see people and study the human nature, the psychology of people, the emotions of people. They were like Albert Einstein in ancient time, and they had very in tune to people. And I'll give you an example. They talked about the production and how they would build this stairway and have the pharaoh come out, and he would be draped in this hooded thing, and he would have his scepters, and they would have the oil pans lined up to light the oil with a burning string, how it would go pan to pan to pan as you walk down the steps, and poof, light up, and they would put on this big production play to just kind of mesmerize the people with what the people would think is magic, and fool people to think this guy was a demigod, like he was now ascending onto the earth, half man, half God, from the gods out there that everybody wanted to know. Everybody was looking for God. And it was easy to fool people in that time because they were naive and they didn't know anything. And these things kind of did. But now the problem you have, they fool people, and now all of a sudden people are doing what this guy says, and it's working out good. He's now got his little throne set up, and now they're all, all these evil geniuses with their evil collaborated team of people are like, oh wow, this is great. Everybody's doing what we want them to do. Now the key is, how do you get everybody to continue doing what you want them to do? How do you get people to protect you in your position of power? These things came with what was known as shared privilege. And I'm telling you, the Egyptians thought about this. This is what they did. They came up with an idea of ranks and uniforms and special privileges and rights to people, because what they would do now, one, they're now gods, and they got people working to build them their palace, right? They get them going, and people are doing it because they're afraid this is a god, and they got to do what they got to do. And that's the words, like going around like, oh my God, there's a half man, half god god on earth. And oh my God, the guy said we got to do. Everybody go build the walls. Do what he says. He'll strike us with lightning. That's the kind of like what was going on back then, And so they built this up. Now, when he gets this built up, and of course, then people get after a while, they're like, hey, you know what? We've been building this wall. I haven't seen this guy do anything. How do we know this guy? They start questioning, right? And how do you keep order? Well, eventually the Egyptian pharaohs and those within the order of them realized that in order to maintain control, they would have to have power over these people, to force those who start thinking for themselves to shut the hell up. So what they would do is they started picking out the stronger of the people who were the dominant, who appeared to be like the leaders of little groups, and they would give them a special uniform and a special shield and a special little hat for himself, and they would make him a chief like order of a guard to the pharaoh. And now he's got privilege, and his family's got privilege. They get the spoils now. His family gets moved into a nice little cave, and what have you. And this is how it goes. Now he's got his little shield, his little hat. He's like somebody important. But the deal is, like, the pharaoh's guards tell him, look, you got to go out there and straighten these people out and get them, keep them working. So he goes out now, and then they give him a little rank. He goes and collects his friends. They give them all little special lower rank helmets and little special shields and things like that, so they're recognized as being his lower rank. And then their families get a little special privilege too. You see, the pharaohs understood you got to give a little to get a little. And now these people would go out and literally start ordering and pushing around their own people to keep that privilege, to keep that position of power. And as things grew, eventually the pharaoh had an army protecting him of these elitists that he would feed with these fancy uniforms and fancy shields and fancy titles and what have you, and fancy authority positions, and where they would do what they wanted to do because they would be ashamed to lose that position. They wanted that prestige, that power. And these things, like I'm saying, people say to me, well, what does this have to do to today? Well, we're still using these very things today. This is what you see with police ranks, sergeant, major, generals, and all this stuff. Not to take away from the fact that these things also represent that of true wisdom and rank, but the order of how they're done is still from the ancient time. Not so much by people. We recognize as people, we understand that, you got a major, a sergeant, a general, what have you. These guys have rank, and it reflects their wisdom. Their bands reflect that of their experience, that shows their wisdom, and we see that as that. But the government sees it as positions of power. There's nothing like being demoted. Now, you got, like, for instance, we see what happened with General Flynn and stuff, right, in our modern time. Now, and then you see the president goes and he pardons him, and these are all political play. That's outside the realm of what these, and it's all about these uniforms and this honor to these things. And these people will betray their own people to keep happy the rulers who control their position of authority, power, and recognition of who they are by the attributes they get. You understand what I'm saying? And this is how it was all the way back in ancient Egypt, and it still goes on to this day. When you get an officer who's a police officer, and he's in there right now, and he gets a dictatorial, treasonous scumbag chief of police who's following the treasonous, no-good scumbag mayor, and, the chief calls in and he says to him, hey, look, deputy, if you want to be a sergeant, you gotta go out, you gotta tell these guys, you're gonna have to lead this team, go down there, straighten out those people down there crying about the government trying to raise a rhetoric of grievance. Go out there, beat them with some clubs, smack the shit out of them, get them out of here, tear gas them, do what you got to do. And the private's like, hey, wait a minute, Sarge, Chief, these are Americans, these are my neighbors. He said, look, you want to get fired, you want to get demoted? Give me that badge. Oh no, wait a minute, no, don't take my badge. Okay, I'll go do. You see, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. And this is how it relates, because this is how the Egyptians got people to do it back then. When you wonder how was it that people were able to get other people to battle, beat up, whip, enslave their own people, was by this. It was a trade-off between that of your self-gratification and the position given you. What's in the position given you, you didn't understand that eventually they were going to have, you have to do this. And at first, it was like, you're a good guy, you're going to be the order, you're going to help people, you're going to be the king's guard, you're going to be an important person, blah, blah, blah. And then, he's all happy, his family's all happy and everything. And then eventually it's going to be like, hey, we need you to go down there and smack these people around. And, well, what do you mean? That's my neighbor. Well, yeah, give me back. I guess you're not ready for this. Oh, well, no, I'll do it. You see what I'm saying? This is human nature. And this is how they've been playing. And it's still effective today, and it's still what goes on today. And it goes on through all different ranks. And there's this thriving in humanity for power. The problem is, what we look at in world history is that we see, like in the rise and falls, how these things are used throughout history. We see this with the Babylonians after the Egyptians, after the system worked, and they were able to fool these people into doing what they wanted to do without risking themselves. Once they realized the process was perfected and worked, Nebuchadnezzar is like one of the greatest rulers of the ancient Babylonian cities and empire. And this guy would eventually even overthrow Egypt itself, and he would use everything that they found. And he would become a guy who wanted to declare himself God of all gods. Insanity. And the ranks of this ancient history, though, would be shared. Families would break up into, like, tribes. and of the royal families that are doing this, and they would share this wisdom and information with each other, and they would keep it what's known as the ancient secrets. Egypt, Arabia today, Iran, many of the Eastern cultures, even India, has this long-standing ancient history of orders, okay, and they follow it. It's how they've sustained for thousands of years. They found the perfected way of how it works and what doesn't work through that of the psychology and the human nature. And what works is what's kept. And you can't say it doesn't, because like I say, when we look at Egypt, we're talking 7,000, 8,000 years of sustention, where they've been around for 7,000, 8,000 years. Still to this day, it's the very same royal families of the same names back in Ramses' time today ruling Egypt. So it works. Obviously, it's working, right? Same thing when you look at like Arabia, the same royal families are same names for centuries now. You look at the United Kingdom, same names of the royal families with the Queen for centuries now. These people all placate. And what religion does, and ideology and theologies of gods does, is creates a basis for that of totalitarianism. You see, it's human nature, like I said, we know there's a God. Everybody knows there's an inward, and even an atheist. Trust me, an atheist, even in any moment where they're facing the possibility of dying, the first thing they think is, oh God, trust me. It's inherent in us. We know there's a God. And these people are able to play off that God knowing, like natural order. And that's what they do. They present something to us to give us something to tangibly connect to God. Outside of that of the one true God that, like of the Hebrews and what have you, the outward just understanding of that, you can't see God because God's everything and everything is within God. There's a higher understanding, and then there's a level of just incomprehensible where people want to be able to just believe in something, and these people are the ones who give them something to believe in, and it goes on. That's how it goes on. They present themselves as the authority of God, and we don't question God. We'll question each other as humanity, but we don't question God. And when you allow for totalitarianism, and where a governing authority, it rises up and can self-proclaim itself a demigod or a god, and then people are convinced through indoctrination that this person or this thing is actually an entity of God, like Nebuchadnezzar, for instance, is going to self-proclaim God, okay? It's natural instinct to not question God. So, they are able to get away with doing whatever they want because they create an order by that of the natural orders of different ideologies and religions, and where, you question God, it's blasphemy, you get killed. So anybody who would raise opposition or question these sick, totalitarian rulers would be killed. They had the order of the guards and their ranks and what have you broke all the way down from the major line of defense to the soldier defense to the little private defense, like in private ranks, and then there's just the common frontliners of the volunteers who are trying to look to be important. And then they would anybody had an issue or an uprising, they would send them out to kill their own people. And right now in America, like I say, this is what we're facing right now in America. We're in that very situation right now. The last time we faced this situation was 160 years ago with Abraham Lincoln, and we're right back to it right now. But these things all relate to that of ancient history, because the order and the process of human nature is repetitive in doing the same thing, unless we are aware of it. You see, unless we are aware of it, which we know from times of more modern times, and where you look at World War II and you understand that of communist thinking, you understand that of China's communism. Believe me, these theories of human nature and practiced by these foreign totalitarian communist regimes are all being that of what was known in ancient times. It's a process that's been going on for thousands of years. We look here now when we go from an evil genius to that of a non-evil genius, a more humane genius. Like we get up here to Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was a man of, I believe, to be a genius. He was like Albert Einstein of his time. He was able to figure out what was going on, and he could see the evil intent of the evil geniuses and how they played and manipulated humanity. And he realized, I could do this too, but I could do this for the good. And so he did. He established a kingdom of more of that of a liberated, free kingdom, freedom where everybody. And then he tried to establish an order of let's keep it real, people. No man's God. There's one God, and ultimate power of all creation of we don't see, but we know is there because we see what we see, and we know we didn't create it. So, he kind of had that theory of where he followed that of like the Hebrew of the one God theory. And this man would not bow to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. He would not bow to any man being a god. And, if you read the biblical stories, they have the stories about David and Ishmael and Abednego and the den of lions and what have you. That's the era this comes from. And in reading the Bible back when I was a kid on these things here, it was fascinating. And then you had the mythical movies of Hollywood with like the Ten Commandments and things like that, It really led your imagination to run wild. But like I say, in looking into the facts and trying to find the facts, most of that stuff got crushed from me because I was like, I can't find this stuff in history. I can't find the evidence of this delusional realities of what people wanted to push out and do it. But especially in recognizing the reality of that, realizing a lot, like for instance, I'll give you an example. There was a story that was told on one of the tablets about Moses. And that's what I say. People like today, they say Moses was a myth. If we really looked at the artifacts we had and actually took the time to decipher these things from the hieroglyphics of what they were in their time and read them today, we'd realize this is not just worthless information. It has very good information. On those tablets, there were 7 pages I had that were Xerox that were broken down to me that were fascinating because they were mentioning about Moses and how he did the snake thing with the staff. They talked about like what was called this mar clay. Of what's this mar clay we use today, it's called for quick set spackle. Like it really quick sets up, hardens, right? And what they would do is, according to the tablet, I'm just going off memory here from when I was a kid and reading it, you would take like a cobra or you would take like a king snake and you smoke it and it becomes like a lethargic and limp if you smoke it. And with this some kind of incense they burn, they make it lethargic. Then they would take it and they wet it in water and they roll it in this mar clay stuff that's a quick set. And mar clay kind of like a brownish mud, and you can paint it. And you roll that thing in it, and then it hardens up, and you pop a hole in each end, and now it can breathe. It has air. The snake is stuck in there, okay? And it's in this hard, like clay staff, okay? And, of course, in time it gets hungry. And the story was about how Moses outwitted Pharaoh, because Pharaoh used cobras. And Moses knew from wisdom, I guess, just from study of history and nature and the habits of animals, he realized that the king snake ate other snakes, and he rolled his staff of what would be the snake. Because you see also too, if you do it in a certain density and you throw this staff on the ground, it will shatter into a dust, and then boom, there's a snake. You see, it's like magic. So this kind of blew, like I said, this kind of like threw the whole biblical theoretics of Hollywood out the window for me, because I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's bullshit, but that's the reality. That's just what it is, people. That's the reality. And, some people might say, oh, wait a minute, I get it too. I believe this stuff too until I read this stuff, and then you got to realize reality. But that doesn't mean there's not a God. That doesn't mean Jesus isn't God. I love Jesus. I know Jesus loves me. Jesus is God. I get it. But the smoke and the mirrors of humanity itself does what it does, and we have to be able to separate the delusion of reality with humanity and that of the truth of God. Okay? And that's what our founders of this country, by the end of this, you'll understand, did and wanted. And we are a Christian-founded nation, but by the end of this, we'll understand that. But anyway, we go forward now. We can see that in the rise of the Chinese dynasties. The thing I'm trying to do is point out here the habit that how the ancient ways continued to spread, and they were the cause of the rise of empires by what methods they would rise by. Because then when we get to the rise of China too, we have the emperors now of China, right? Demigods, half men, half God again. You have this God association. And what you realize after a while of studying ancient history up to modern time is that the God thing of demigods and what have you, and fake idol gods and what have you, were being used as a totalitarian means that, as we know by natural inherent instinct, we don't question God. And it would be okay for rulers to set up an order where they could do inhumane things to people who do question God in what they call blasphemy, right? So, and this is what I'm saying. So this thing worked, and everybody around the world, it wasn't like Egypt was the only geniuses, or the Hebrew only had a genius, or Cyrus. The world had many geniuses, like it does still to this day. People of high intelligence that are just born with this gift. And evil geniuses would be the rise of these other empires. They would realize and understand what Egypt was doing. This knowledge would be shared, and actually, the Chinese dynasties broke off from Egypt. At the fall of some points, because eventually too there's this thing what happens. Eventually you have the strong of humanity who have common sense, Okay, and they might not be genius, but you can't fool these people. They have common sense. And in these rise of these empires and the things they're doing, there's these people who will step back and they'll look at it and they'll be like, what the hell's going on here? You know, even though they've been indoctrinated their whole life, they were the rebellious one their whole life. Like, I don't buy this. What are you talking about? I can't. You know, you take that hat off of me, and then that, you know, and the mother, shut up, don't, you know. And that would be the kid though that grows up and he's like, yeah, okay, I see what's going on here. And then he would organize himself a big group of people too. He would look at that army that the pharaoh had or the emperor had, and he would say to himself, okay, so I need an army that big. And he would get with other people and he'd start telling other people, look, this is BS. This guy's no god. They're fooling everybody. And he would look for the people who were receptive to that. Be like, you know, I've been wondering. Yep, I want you. Come over here. And the guy who was like, no, he's a god. I see. Okay, you just go home. You know, you don't want. He would sort out the people who had a realistic perspective and had been questioning these things like him. They become unified. And eventually they become unified enough and big enough that they would challenge the authority of the pharaoh or the emperor, and with their own, you know, and they would go and do it. They'd be the front guy. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes that front guy would have the balls, he would step up, and the emperor would be like, order my biggest man. And the biggest man goes out there with a sword and cuts his freaking head off. And in the moment of that happened, all the people he thought had his back didn't have his back. They all get scared and they're like, oh, well, and they all go back to doing what they were doing. And it's like he's the only idiot that got killed. Then there's a time where he steps out there and he's by himself and he challenges, and the emperor says to him, well, who the hell are you and what do you think, you know? And then the biggest guy, and all of a sudden, like, you know, 100 people step up like, no, we're here with him. And then, it's like, whoa. You know, the pharaoh realizes, oh, God, hold on, wait a minute, this guy's got a little army with him. You know, and now they got to negotiate, they got to talk. And eventually the pharaoh realizes this guy's got reason and common sense, and the people with him got reason and common sense. And they're not falling for the BS. So now there's negotiations. And, you know, but pretty much when you got a common sense human being who has found his balance with God and he understands the truth of nature's laws and the laws of nature's God, he doesn't want to play that game. And he doesn't want to see any of humanity, no matter how duh they are, suffering under the hand of the oppression of being slaves under some fake demigod. And they're going to expose it by every means possible. Usually this would wind up in a treaty of an agreement where they could leave. They could take their little tribe of people who agree with them, and they could leave. And, you know, and that would be the thing, too. They were kind of like, yeah, let's all get together, let's get the hell out of here. And they start their own little place somewhere else. But trust me, the thing that people don't understand is when you look at ancient history, and it's still to this very day, so understand this is all important because it's still to this very day, these demigods, these self-proclaimed geniuses of that time, of the self-proclaimed authorities over people who would enslave humanity, they would have breakaways of their own family who would learn these rules and rituals of how, and they would build up other kingdoms under different names. And there was an order that got established, and it's self-evident, and it's like today we call it proxy wars. And what these kings would do, the pharaohs, they had others who were actually family members, totally aware of each other, but complicit in being enemies, intentional enemies. But they weren't really enemies. The two leaders of the two tribal areas were not really enemies. They just made the people enemies to each other to keep a rivalry between them. Because what would happen is like this, and you see this in the writings of it, and the direction is given by the pharaohs and eventually given by that of the dynasties that rose in China with their demigods as well. And you see this even with the Babylonians and their demigods to the rise of, where you got to the superior list of the guy who wanted to be the almighty God, Nebuchadnezzar, how they did this. What it is when they would set up different, like you would say, well, why would they want to have, you know, my brother over here, he's running, nobody even knows they wouldn't tell each other their relation. They would keep these things secret. They would just take an order of certain people over that way. Because they realized when the common sense rose up, if you follow him here, when the common sense guy rose up and he left with his people, other people would be like, hey, where are they going? And some would straggle and follow them. So what the pharaohs and the geniuses realized, well, you know what? How do we counter that? I know how we counter that. How about we have, when that happens, we get one of our own to go play with them like they're on their side, and they'll break up that, and they can move over here, and they can start an outward tribe. of people that will play like they're, and they'll tell his brother, you go do that, go do what Cyrus the Great did, and rebel against me, and take a bunch of people with you, go over there, because the kingdom's getting too big anyway, I can't manage all these people. Get your own guard set up, get your own palace built, and you manage them over there, and we'll hate each other. We'll make the people hate each other. Now, see, that this works out when you look at how they planned it and what they did. Was so that, let's say now you got these two brothers, two rivalries, right? The people don't like each other. They're always at arms. And the reason for this is, now let's just say we're gonna come up with two fictional towns. Town Z and Town H, right? And our Village H and Village Z, right? Now, Village Z's people start kind of like, the Pharaoh's like working them to death, and it's got them like slaves, and they get very little reward for what they're doing, and they start questioning things. And then, next thing you know, there's like 1,000 of them at the gate of the Pharaoh talking about, we want, like a little union organization, right? And what does he do? He calls his brother up, or he sends somebody on horseback over, hey, my people are rebelling, attack my city. You see, this is what happens. This is the proxy. So now his brother, because they're already rivalries, his brother goes out and tells his army, they're weak, they're fighting, they're attacking, go attack the city. So then his army goes, he sends them, they attack. Now it's not him and his brother getting killed, they're not at threat, they're the rulers. And if one does actually start to overthrow the city, well, he'll just fleet it out of his brother and he'll take refuge there, and they'll hide him and, bring him out later when everybody forgets about it and work it out. And this is seen in history how they do this. So now they send that army over. Now the people all of a sudden no longer are paying attention to their grievance they have with the Pharaoh. They're like, because they're being attacked now. So now it's like, oh my God, we got to fight. Now that Pharaoh comes out and he looks around like, yeah, you son of a bitches, you want to rise up against me? Now look what happens to you. Now you got war. What are you going to do? And of course he lets them get attacked, and he sends out little skirmishes of the army, only like in helpless. The people are getting slaughtered, and what do? They come crying back to their king, right? Their Pharaoh. Oh, help us. And then, of course, now he gets to become the hero. And what he does now is he calls up, or he makes deals with his brother that he's going to send out a final thing, a wave, and that, he needs to order his men to back off. And then his men back off, they run from it. Now he just went from the guy they were all complaining about, who they were seeing as a tyrant, getting ready to overthrow, to now he's a hero. You see how it works, people? They've been doing this for thousands of years. This is how they do it. They've been playing chess with the world for thousands of years. Okay? The chess game itself is an actual order of process that was a board used in these freaking plannings of these things among the rulers, the superiorist of the evil geniuses that have been ruling this world for thousands of years. And this is no joke. A lot of people may think what I'm saying is like, they're like, really? Are you? Yeah, really. This is how, and it's still going on to this day. It's still going on to this day. It's inherent within the rulers of these nations that rise and fall, and it's been being passed on for centuries, and you can't deny it because, like I say, they have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Here's another genius who rose up and kind of like he was another, like Cyrus the Great. He figured it out and realized how it worked and realized, damn, I could use this to my benefit. The only problem, too, like I say, power corrupts. We learn in history that power corrupts. We learned this from Alexander the Great. We also learned how power corrupts from even like some of the wisest men in the world, like Solomon, King Solomon, who, mind you, too, I'd like to say, understand like history gets washed and changed. There was really, during Solomon's time, he was not really a king. There was tribal leaders. There was no kings in that time. There was no order of kingdoms in that time. They were tribal villages and leaders. They just changed those names to associate them with what eventually evolved into the orders of control like they did as time progressed. But like I say, you see the fall of even Solomon, one of the most wisest men in history. Eventually the power corrupts, and you lose vision of what you really, the good intent you wanted to do was eventually, because eventually, the sad truth of it is the majority of humanity is idiots. They're just people who are self-serving, greedy, disgusting. I mean, we are, as humans, I mean, it's undeniable. We are a disgraceful creation by God, it appears, of our own free will. We are the most destructive thing on this planet. We are the most destructive thing to ourselves. And, in our power and position of it, we are the total upset of disgrace in this world. It's just horrible what goes on. But you know what? There's nothing you can do, because that's just the way it is. You get people of evil intent, and that comes from cultural inheritance. Society is known, and the goal of the totalitarians of this world is known. Like Alexander the Great understood the psychology in a different level, in a sense. And what he did, in a sense, in the spread of the Roman Empire, was looking to create like a unified world order. But in a sense, it was in his way. You see, today we look at that like anybody who would say they want to do that. Oh my God, he's a total totalitarian. And in a sense, yeah, he was. He was looking to dominate and rule the world, but not really of the intent of the evil. If you studied him and you realize he was looking for a way to try and wake all the world up to understand there is no gods like demigod men. That nobody's God, nobody's special, nobody has royal blood, not even me. Wake up. But then he got lost in the corruption, the perversion, and the idiocy of the power. And that's where it all went downhill again. And, that's the other thing, too. Understand that these world leaders, they understand, and what we see like in Athens and ancient Greece, which we're getting up near around these times now, we have the rise of Christianity, okay? Now, understand now, see, things like this is where you start to find how the real God of the energy of of all the world and universe starts to intercede and gives a path. Because I believe that when we study the history of humanity and you find men seeking the question to answer, or the answers to questions they don't know, and they get the answer, you can't answer a question you don't know yourself because you don't know. So there is an outward power, I believe, of a higher power of authority, which is our God, that kind of does, he has to, in order to try and keep the order going in the right direction, give humanity some kind of guidance and direction. And there's special people that seek that higher power to such a level they actually get true guidance from God, and they're able to perceive that, and God's able to give it to them a way where in our simple being as humans we can understand it, or even through their great gifts of genius that is given by God, of which even the genius has free will. So I guess, God, all of us stand by a test with God in our faith is to understand that God has faith in us that by our free will we'll do the right thing when he blesses us. But that's not always the case. With free will, we can defy God, and that's what an evil genius does. He's like Lucifer. He wants to be God. And, and he can't accept the reality of there can only be that one God of all creation. The first thing of all things that are is God. And there's no way of really actually changing that. But then, that person who's got that ego that big just can't accept that and defies the self-evident of truth before them, and continues a battle to want to fight to defy that and lead people to believe that they're the God. The war's been going on between God and Lucifer, is what the Bible talks of, or religion, right? Speaks of this battle of good and evil has been going on since what we know of all of it to be time. So when we get to the point of Christianity, we get an enlightenment from God. In spite of at this time here when Christianity arose, we still had the majority of the dominance in the world was a one God order among the Jews and them. But then they got corrupt too, because you had now them using Judaism as a totalitarianism form too, and where they were becoming a governing authority by the authority of God. And you see, this is totalitarianism. When you incorporate governing with state of religion, like state and religion are one and the same, it becomes totalitarianism. So God had to, when you look at history, all the way from the book of Genesis forward, you realize that God was laying out a plan with men they called the prophets. And these prophets were men who sought this higher understanding. They were probably somewhat gifted in genius in some senses of, just being able to think outside the box of the common, normal, just human. And in their seeking, God gave them great wisdom, direction, and guidance. And where, I guess, he laid out a plan that they didn't even realize they would be saying at the time, and eventually what they said, even after their time was gone and they were dead, these events would come to light to happen. And anybody paying attention to history, following along with them things, would kind of be like, whoa, what the hell? That guy, 300 years ago said this was going to happen, and wow, there it is, it happened. And then there's this guy who said, and then like 500 years later, it happened. You see, and things, and then you realize that eventually it's not coincidence. It's actually evidence of that God is speaking with humanity in some sense with those the special people he selected and picked it. And these people are the ones who have the faith in the ability that they like, let's just say, I'm just gonna, in theory, God comes and talks to you today, right? Let's say you're driving in your car and all, like, it's like that movie with what's his name, Oh God, and all of a sudden God's in the seat next to you and he says, hey, I'm God. Now and he tells you something, and then you pull over, he disappears, he pops out, you're looking around, there's a crowd, a bunch of people. Are you going to get out and tell that crowd, hey, God just appeared in the car next to me and told me this? Can you believe that? They can't. They'll put you in a freaking nut house, right? And you know this. So but the guy who actually realizes God was there, and he understands with faith, and he understands through that faith that he has gotten answers to questions he himself couldn't have asked, and got answers from because he didn't know them. And he understands the reality of God speaking to him and guiding him and giving him direction by his humble ability to seek that wisdom of God. He will stand out among men and say what he knows to be truth of God without fear, because he knows that reality of God. And I'm no special man, but I know that reality of God. I love God, and I know God loves me. And I know no matter what happens in my feeble little humble life of my little short time here, I might see another 20 years in this world, maybe 25, I don't know. We have my Aunt Fran, who's 100 years old this year. So God bless her. If I have her genes, I could be around a little bit longer, but I don't know. But I know even 100 years or 120 years is just a blink of an eye compared to infinity in time. I have a short span here. I'm just traveling through. I'm just passing through, trying to figure out what it was I came here to learn. And then I'll move on. And it really doesn't matter what I do or don't do. It does matter. I do believe that it does matter. I'd be wrong to say that, to give anybody that direction. I'm wrong. Cause and effect does matter, and we will live forever with what we cause to happen. So I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, Christianity rises. Now, we find that the plot of Jesus was long planned by God from the book of Genesis forward. God was laying out these things were going to happen. Some look at the prophets and they don't realize how in depth back it goes. It starts in Genesis all the way back with Abraham at the time when he's asked to offer up his own son Isaac. And we realize that when humanity, through Abraham, showed he was willing to sacrifice his own son, this becomes the theme of what God is going to do for redemption of humanity. So the story goes, right? If you don't believe in God, you don't believe in religion, I don't care for religions. As we advance in this going forward, you'll understand that. But I do have a great relationship with God. I do know my Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ. I don't deny the facts of evidence and truth of that, of which I'll try to explain my opinions on that. And they're not in the basis of religion. I don't care for a title to religion. I don't need a title to religion. My relationship, like I say, I got to be here in this world maybe 100 years tops, and then I got to be with God forever. So I'm not looking to play games with my forever for nobody's views or opinions of what they want to do in religions, okay? Religions are man's ideology and his method of way, and where he has looked at things and then he's concluded that this is an order of which he believes God would want man to be, and some people agree with him and they all follow that. They become a religion. That's religion, okay? Then there's the true self-evident order of God that no one can deny within the laws of nature as set by nature's God, Almighty God himself, okay? And that's where I walk with God. I walk in what's self-evident and what I can't deny to be the truth, and I try to walk upright with God and be a man of just truth. That's all I care about is the truth, because the truth is the only thing of all things real in this world. Anything outside of the truth is a damn lie, and there's no substance of reality to a lie. It's the cause of all evil, in my opinion. It's my opinion. You might differ. But anyways, we move forward now. We get into the times with like Genghis Khan. We see other things rising where this continuation of ancient ways of like power and hunger. Genghis Khan was considered an evil tyrant. He nearly took over like Alexander the Great or the Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He ruled a massive part. Everybody's got a little Genghis Khan in him too, because this guy, during his reign, had seeded many, many children. And there's not many people on any continent in the earth doesn't have a DNA blip in him that has a little bit of Genghis Khan. And but what he, one of his famous quotes was, and it might not be verbatim, I'm going off memory here, where he said, "Had your sins not been so great, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." And and that was his justification for his waging of war on the world, was the sins of the world. And when you look back in that time, you understand what Genghis Khan, he was telling the truth. Humanity was in kind of like a state it is today, though we can't recognize it because then it was more primitive. You see, we rate everything by what we see. And, today we have cell phones. Today we go to the moon. Today we have airplanes and helicopters. We could not be those primitive people at that time. Well, I got news for you. Just because we have planes and helicopters and internet and TV and we go to the moon and we have telescopes and we have all this advancements in technology does not change human nature. And what you see back in the time before Genghis Khan's rising, of which he was a genius of his time, he was able to do, like I say, he was one of those men who had that gift, and he could look out and he figured it all out, and he realized, because how does one man become so powerful in the world, right? Unless he's truly a genius. He's definitely figured out how to, I mean, when you're somebody like Genghis Khan and you literally get the majority of the world to back you in your efforts, you have figured out how human nature works, and you have figured out how to manipulate that human nature, and you have figured out exactly what the people want because they're all reciprocal to it with you, right? That's undeniable. This guy knew what was going on, and he had figured out a way to derail all the people in power in the world in his time. And that was his goal and his purpose. You see, because in that time, you had, at this time of Genghis Khan, you had Christian kings who had figured out a way to totalitarianize Christianity. And Christianity was not a very good religion to use for totalitarianizing as a self-proclaimed leader of the dictator or what have you, because it was a religion and ideology of great peace through the truth of God. So it was in a failing basis on that point. But then you also had other nations with their false demigods, and you still had the gods of Egypt and the things like that, and the gods you had the emperors, the half men, half gods still of China. So you had all these conflicted things, and Genghis Khan seen this, and he was like, you know what? I'm going to rock all your worlds. I'm just going to rock all your worlds, because he recognized, too, that those are the most powerful who are afflicting humanity the most inhumane ways possible. Enslaving people, working people to death, no value for life, whatever. Just a bunch of, those are the cliques of these nations, were self-proclaimed elitist scumbags, inhumane people who were self-serving and only cared about themselves, and they wanted to rule as gods, and everybody had to do what they wanted, and the common average human was no expense to them. They were just assets that were disposable. And Genghis Khan witnessed the inhumanity of these sick, powerful people and how they were using humanity and afflicting humanity. And he, I had a modern day World War II veteran one time tell me that the only way that you can defeat evil is you must conquer it with that of an equal or greater evil out of good intent. Most people may say to me, did you just say Genghis Khan acted out of good intent? Yes, he did. He did. His own saying of that God would not have sent the punishment like me upon you had your sins not been so great in itself shows that his intent was to try and correct the sins of humanity of what he envisioned. And you can't say and take from the man the denial that he was a genius in what he had to do. Look what the man accomplished. And if you don't understand, this man was somebody selected by God, though he may not have believed in the true God, and he may not have found that we can't judge what God uses humanity for. It's evident this man had an important role in the world to change in the direction of humanity that led it to an enlightenment era. So, understand, like I say, you're looking at maybe the current event of it, and you're looking at certain stereotypes of the nostalgia of it, of what people want you to take into reflect of what their opinions of Genghis Khan is. But draw your own conclusion from the facts of the reality and the truth, like I'm saying, of things, and you'll realize that this guy was not the average common man who just all of a sudden actually became almost ruler of the world. It's just unrealistic. God is able to use all of humanity however God feels needed to be used to try and keep things on the course of what's God's true intent. This is what I believe. When people say to me, you got to realize that in life, people, in truth, the world ends every 120 years. Not many people live more than 120 years. And right now, we're in this parallel of literally hundreds of worlds that are rising and falling and ending, being born and what have you. Because, like you take, for instance, right now, we can go, say, today's 2020. So go back to 1890. Find me somebody alive from 1890. You can't. Their world ended. All who were with them in 1890, up from the point of, say, from 1800 to 1890, they no longer, that's it. When the last guy from 1890 alive from the 1900, or 1801 dies, that whole world is done now. You see, that whole time is gone. All in it are gone. Nothing's left but the reflection of the history and the wisdom of the cause and the effect that they leave us, that if we don't reflect back on, we're going to repeat the same mistakes they made, no matter how advanced in technology we become, or what we assume ourselves to be in civilized humanity. Obviously, we're not civilized as what we think, because look at what we do. Look at what we're doing right now in our own nation, the idiocy of this nation. But let's move forward and get on to the basis. Because understand, I'm just trying to lead you up to how America became who it is. And all this plays in a role of it, because understand, in this span of time as we're going forward, and all these people are rising and falling, we get to a point like here now, when we get to Athens in Greece and the Spartans. This would be the first times where we would start to get a reflection of a humanity, of human nature, to want to start realizing that it doesn't need governments. That we as a people are somehow endowed by whatever gods, they might have had a lot of mythical gods they believed in, but people of this time with the Greeks realized that the common man has a right to certain things given by whatever gods he honors, or fake gods or the real God. And we had the developments of the first rising, and where a society developed that didn't have a totalitarian dictator, didn't have a totalitarian king or a self-proclaimed elitist or demigod. Well, that's not true, though. The Greeks did have these rises, these people who claim to be like born of Zeus, like Hercules and what have you. But I'm just saying, the moral values of society itself in Greece with Athens moved more toward that of a king who was honored and respected by the people as a common of one of the people. It was the first establishing starts to see what we become to understand what a republic would evolve to be. And but we also see the world's reaction to that. Oh, they did not like that. You see, because this is not a good thing for totalitarian regimes and dictators and self-proclaimed supremacist leaders and demigods, because, well, they want to rule over the people, and what Greece was recommending was that even the rulers be equal to the people, and that the people be the authority. Oh, that's not good for the world. And these people, by this time we get here, where we get up to the time of Greece doing this, we're thousands of years. This is like, 750 years after Jesus and Christianity, and that's what I'm saying. The enlightenment of these things that start to push people toward thinking about because the Greeks thought about Jesus, and they had learned about Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, and it was, I think, these things that may have sparked the idea and the concept of, God-given rights to man, with the first establishing of an attempt at a republic with Greece, was often the Christian teachings of what they learned as things progressed. We see as these things go forward, that now we have the sad conflicting things. Like I say, humanity did not like these things. And the counter to this was, mind you, at this time too, you had many Christian kingdoms rising up. Like, one thing, a lot of people like the King James Version Bible. I like it. It is a very great interpretation. But the truth of the Bible, of the King James Bible, is more fascinating to me than what it is about. Most people today, when I talk to them, I say, what do you think of the King James Version? And what do you think of King James? And they're like, oh, he was a great guy. He loved God. Nope, that's all lies. He was an atheist. He didn't give a damn about God. King James' whole quest in the interpretation of this was to learn about Christianity, the order and the progress of it, so that he could use Christianity in a way where he could form the sects of religions like the Catholics, the Protestants, the Methodists, all these divisive means. And this is what, too, has been formed from ancient times, dividing people so that you can keep the people within your control always at arms with each other, never focused on you. This is learned over thousands of years. And this is the cause of all the different kind of ideologies, theologies, religions, practices, parties, political establishments. It's all about divide and conquer. And when you look at all the Christian churches at the time with King James just wanted to figure out, okay, who is this Jesus? What is this new religion? And why are the people all following it? And then when he had everything broken down and he got the full picture of things, he was like, okay, so all I have to do to remain king and power of the world is get all the people who follow Jesus now somehow to believe I'm ordained as king by Jesus. Okay, we can do that. What they did was they gave special privilege to the priest and the Pharisees, who would be teaching Christians, the prophets, or the what you would call the apostles of Jesus, or the men who gone out and they're teaching this. And he would get some of them, and power corrupts, right? You see how power corrupts in greed. He would find some of these men who were, they were buying Christianity, and they were like, this is a great thing. But they also had a desire for wealth and power. And he would say to them, look, you're pretty respected among the Christians. Can you do me a favor? I'll build you a house within the kingdom. I'll give you a nice prestige, a couple chariots, some nice horses, your own little farmland. You'll never have to worry about nothing. All I need you to do, though, is work out some kind of order where when you go out, you got to tell these people that God has told you that Jesus has ordained me to be the ruler. Can we do that? And, this guy's like, well, I'm a good Christian and all. And at that time, morals and values were not established in deep, I guess, with humanity. And he got the guy who was like, hey, I do know a lot. They listen. So you're going to give me a house, huh? And horses and chariots. And my own guards, really? Oh, really? Oh, gold? Oh, okay. Let's see. What do we call this religion we're going to start? How do we do this? Right away, you see there's a negotiation and agreed. And the same thing what we learn here with Athens. On the first republic to establish with a house and a senate and a congress kind of establishment of government rule of that of the people. And the senators and them would have to dwell among the people, debate things among the people. It was a very good order, an attempt at a republic at that time. And eventually, though, we know that the Persians came in and the Babylonians came in and they were able to corrupt the senators with gold and money, just like King James is doing with the priest of the Christianity. He's corrupting him and getting him to do what he wants. And the same thing happened here. Now we see the same events of what took place with the fall of Greece in its first great fall is happening right now again in the world this very day. It's repeating itself, history, because we forgot the history. We forgot it. And if you were to take this time right now outside of the modern advancements of technology and lay it over that time, you would see that the very same people are still all in power around the world. It's the same people. And the same exact events are taking place with the freedom of sexual liberation to weaken that of the warrior man, because Greece had formed one of the most feared and greatest military armies of men in our history. The Spartans were incredibly warrior men who had no fear, and the world feared them because they would fight. Now, to defeat such a nation, you would have to break that warrior spirit. You have to break that man. And there's no way better to do it. And this is, like I say, the ancient history, the secrets of ancient history. You see, now, and then we as adults, which I imagine most people watching this, we understand the sexual urge and drives of us all. We remember hitting puberty, right? I mean, I remember when I hit friends and stuff, they would do anything to be able to get near a girl, touch a girl, what have you. The driving urge of it, which we know in humanity and history itself, of what reflects on the criminal nature of it, what men will do to be able to have a woman, right? They'll kill for her. They'll do anything for her. They'll kill, they'll rob, they'll steal. The men go out right now, and they study for 8 years in college and get degrees and put their mind to all possible power to become a wealthy man of power so he can pull up in a Corvette and have a beautiful home and court the woman in just to have sex. It's what it's about. And they understand that in totalitarianism, which this has been known throughout all of ancient history, this goes back all the way to ancient Egypt, they use these very things. They focused on that of the posterity. You see, when you lose or you overthrow a people, those people aren't going to forget who they were. They're stuck under the oppression of your new rule, and you have to outlive them or outrun them in their memory. And you have to indoctrinate the new posterity with that of your ideology so that as generations progress forward, they fall in line with you now being the ruler. And they use sex for that. That's what they use. They focus on when you took Athens, Greece, they focused at the youth, hitting puberty and the perversionness of men. And they incorporated then a sexual liberation, a freedom of sexual liberation with homosexuality. The purpose of homosexuality being induced at the time of ancient Greece because of the long-standing known facts of human nature with that of the great establishers of these orders, starting back even before Egypt, with the Babylonians before Egypt, understanding that this kind of acting in queer in nature feminizes a man, takes away the spirit of fight, makes him weak like a woman. No offense to women, but there's an order of nature. That's just the way it is. Men are the stronger, dominant warriors of the world. Women are not, I'm not saying women can't take the war and defend themselves, but the likelihood of success lies more in that of the strength of men. That's just the way nature designed things. And men are the protectors and the defenders of what they are culturally accepting to be that of their society. It's better laid, because women are more vulnerable in separate ways. Like I say, we have women today in war and what have you, and women are very capable. But when it comes down in those times and looking at an actual hand-to-hand situation, a woman hand-to-hand with a man, unless she's very skilled or has a weapon, is probably 9 out of 10 times defeated. And that's it's just a reality. I'm not saying it because I'm saying women are weaker than men. I'm just saying that's just a reality. The natural order of evolution does not make a woman a warrior able to take that of a very big, strong man in a hand-to-hand situation. It's just reality. The mindset, the thinking, the approach, the ability, the anger, the adrenaline, the testosterone, and all of that makes a man a warrior. But when you break it down and you feminize a man with homosexuality, and he becomes like a sissy man, or a woman kind of man, or he wants to be a woman, which is insanity, because now he's lost his identity. You see, and that's what they had to do with the Spartans. They had to strip the Spartans of their warriorness. They had to strip them of their manhood. So they would have the perverted men going in and engaging in pedophilia, homosexuality, and raping these boys, and breaking them down, and so that they would not grow up to be the tough, strong, warrior Spartan men. They would grow up to be sissy boys, little, queer in nature boys. They were queer. They were not men. They were scary with the woman and want to hide from anything that was threatening. And this is how they weakened Spartans in Greece to be overthrown. And, this is a process that's been going on for thousands of years. Greece wasn't the only place this was done. When you look back and you realize the Babylonians did the same thing. This goes all the way back to like Sodom and Gomorrah. Just to give you an idea, this has been long established, known how to manipulate that of human nature on the sexual premise of that of puberty with young men and women, because women are no different. Believe me, when a woman at the age of 13, like I remember when I was younger, and I'm just speaking on an adult level here, we're all adults, get reality. When I was 13 or 12 and I hit puberty, I thought like I would never have sex because women just didn't, it wasn't going to happen. And it wasn't that women didn't want to or the girls didn't want to. It was just that there was a cultural value system of morals among women, and where they considered that to be something sacred that they would give to the man who would be a true man, who would honor, respect, and love them for all their life and would provide for them, and that man would be the one worthy of that virginity, right? And that used to be instilled in women. They weren't such tramps and little trashy sluts like they are today. They had morals and values. The women were more focused at it, given the morals and values, because in truth, they were more disciplined to the morals and values. Men were more throw the morals and values out the window as quick as possible. Men like they, will do anything to have sex. They don't care. Women have a more controllable discipline to it and ability to select how they're going to do it. But today they've lost those morals and values, because like with the men of Spartan and breaking them down, today they're breaking down the order of that of the natural instinctive nature of women. And when we look at the advancements of history, and we look at the civilizations rising and fall of history, we understand that these things too play a role. Like, with Samson and Delilah, you realize that the ancient rulers of these geniuses and this rising, falling of nations and what have you, the people who rule the world understood as well how to use women and sexuality to control their destinies of what they wanted to accomplish in their goal of world domination. And today is no different. These human natures don't change. No matter how advanced we become in technology, human nature does not change. The phase of life and the process of nature does not change. And the reactions in that of, unless, you see, and that's what I'm saying, we had a spell in America as a too, where principles and values were put into men. Men became that of honorable men, and where their honor meant something. And where, men themselves, like, today, we get up into the 50s and the 60s, we get into that point where men then start looking at women as trophies, and every woman they can have sex with is a notch in their belt kind of thing. And we lost the values of being a dignified man, an American, really, an American. Because an American, when you look at the founding principles of Americanism under Christianity's founding, you found that there was an order established as well, kind of like with the Spartans, to be that of a brave and incredibly strong American man, one of the most feared of the warriors of the world. As in the founding of our time, we were known as the most feared warriors of the world, the Americans, because we defeated Great Britain, which was the largest military nation in the world at the time. And everyone, including in the ancient times there, when you look back and reflect on the history of the things that the people in China, Japan, India, all around the world had spoken of the Americans, they spoke with that of fear of the Americans. because we were considered the most bravest of warriors in the world. And that honor of who we were, disciplined to that of how we would evolve to be what we wanted to be in our nation, comes from that of the time, like I say, as things progressed, you had the rise now of like the Ottoman Muslims. And the Muslims in their rise was an ideology that was depicted for total totalitarianism for that purpose, right there. They found Muhammad and they were like, we could do a Jesus thing with this guy and use it for total totalitarianism because he's a warmonger. And they realized that they can manipulate sexual, like I say, premise is the thing with this. It's all about sex and getting virgins and 72 virgins and this, that. They play on the placate of that of the puberty stage of the posterity. They indoctrinate the posterity with this unknowingly. Imagine like before you hit puberty and even having a comprehension of the reality of what sex is and the driving forces of nature to make you want to engage in it. Before you hit puberty, you even had these driving urges, you know that, right? But they were nowhere near like they became when you hit puberty. So imagine your whole life you're being indoctrinated with this stuff. And it's being done in a delusional way of a reality, and where you think that when puberty happens, it's somehow this magical event of your enlightenment to that of your religion. And now you understand the rewards that you're being given if you go out and blow yourself up, or you go out and kill the infidel or the kafir, or you go out and wage war, and so of course that's what I'm saying. You understand, they convert by indoctrination the driving urges of sexuality, which is one of the most strongest urges and driving forces of nature among humanity itself, is to propagate. Like I say, men will do incredibly insane things to impress women to be able to try to have sex with them. It's one of the most strongest sought natural instincts that we have that dominates us literally our entire life. Okay, it's a dominating factor in the entire human life of both male and female, is the sexual urge and drive. Everything the majority of people do when they seek for power, control, prestige, material asset, what have you, is to what? I mean, there is no man in the world who's like, I'm going to become a billionaire and have a big mansion and fancy cars just because makes my dog happy. No. They're doing all that because they want to impress a woman. And they want to be able to engage with that woman. And they want to be able to have sex. That's what it really all comes down to. And when you realize the perversions of people are on the same driving force. This is what we have to understand when we look at things like the rise of Islam and its fake ideology of totalitarianism, and how it has plagiarized that of world religions and cultures to evolve into this totalitarian regime right now, which is waging hell on humanity and has been since its uprise 1,400 years ago, a little over 1,400 years ago. And this is again built off of that of the premise of the long-standing historical, cultural trend of the geniuses of the emperors and the demigods and the pharaohs and what have you, that have risen and fallen in this long span. Because today, like I say, people today have to understand Egypt, 7,000 years, same thing, same people, same right now, still following that same method of practice to maintain their power, and they've been maintaining it for 7,000 years. The royal courts of Egypt, the same thing, 9,000 years. China, 13,000 years. That you see this same human nature principle being applied that keeps them in power. When you look at China right now, and you realize that in truth, the entire order of China consists of no more than probably 1,500 people who are actually the elitist of these ancient families who are in power of the dynasties right now of China. Just like 1,500 of them, that's it. And they keep within their own bloodlines and their own sects by that of their own dynasties of who they are, of the long-standing ancient evolution of their time, and they're controlling billions of people. Billions of people by the indoctrination of the processes, the things I'm telling you, that have been long established and figured out a long time ago by the progression of that of primitive geniuses. And their main study is that of human nature, human habit, human psychology, and human ability to be manipulated, and vulnerabilities of humanity to be manipulated. Like you take, for instance, when you say, how do you control the natural instinct of a man to what he wants to seek in God? Well, you associate it like Islam does to sex. Sex, the most driving. If you have, like Christianity in some of its religious forms, defeats itself and makes it easy. Islam plays off of these things about abstinence And the idiocy of some of the religions of Christianity and the way they act, and some of them the hypocrisy, where like now you have you have gay priests and you have gay nuns, and I mean it's just ridiculous. The hypocrisy and the disgrace of what these people have done to the moral foundation and the principles of Christianity, and their so-called claiming to be authorities in churches and religion. That's why I want nothing to do with religion, is you can see how corrupt they can turn religions by that of man's perverse desires, and to that of the true intent of what the intent was by God. Is clearly these people are not in line with God. These people are just evil, disgusting, perverted people, and they're corrupting everything, and it's for a purpose. So as we move forward, like I say, the Ottoman Empire becomes a thing of a threat to that of that order. You see, humanity had witnessed and realized with King James and them going forward, like you had the Christian kings and what have you. We seen here the change in humanity. You see, the kings had to, when we see the shift from before Christianity, the kings, they were brutal, dictator, totalitarian tyrants that just didn't care, and humans were disposable assets to them. With Christianity, though, because of the moral principles of Jesus' teachings, and that of the right self-evident by God, as with the practices, the way Jesus said, everybody, man has his rights by God given to life, and in the will of God, and you had to, respect these things, are the laws of nature kind of thing. The kings would have to, in order to keep everybody happy who were Christian, they would have to kind of align themselves to those principles, which made things less barbaric, less inhumane. But yet they still kept trying to totalitarianize Christianity, and it was failing though. Because like I say, it's hard to, when something's of truth of God, it's hard to corrupt it. And that's why Christianity has been so sustained for so long. It aligns to the self-evident laws of nature, and nature's God. That's what America was founded upon. And the Ottomans were set out, in a sense, to make sure that of the Jews would be, because the Jews believed in a one true God, of a balance in line with those orders. You had the Ten Commandment order. They were of a social structure in line to the self-evident, be moral with your wife, be moral with your family, don't be a pervert, don't steal, these kind of things that were setting a moral society in place by that of the self-evident will of true God. And then you have to break those things if you want to disrupt that true God and his good intent. If you have evil intent, you have to break those things. So, of course, the Jews and the Christians would become the ultimate enemy of the Muslims. And because the world's totalitarian rulers realize Christianity is not a good religion to totalitarianize a kingdom with. It just doesn't work. It's all about peace, love, unity, equality, and seeking out a true higher understanding of God within the balance of what's self-evident in truth. Well, they can't have that because they want perversion, they want disgrace, they want disgust, they want everything to be under their control. They're just evil people of their own inherent self-will. And it's not even really in truth their own inherent self-will. This has been an indoctrinated, trained in inherent practice for thousands of years. That's indoctrinated. It can be changed by a re-indoctrination, by not so much indoctrination, but by an awakening to morals and values, and a breakdown of this control by these totalitarians that would free the world to have free thought, to be able to do like we have been trying to do since we know of written history, free the world to that of just a humane society of one in the world. But getting there has been a hell of a journey, and we're still obviously on that journey. But what I'm saying is now this evil rising empire becomes a dominance in the world that sets out for the goal of securing that of the world's totalitarian regimes, superior rulers, dictators, and demigods. Because they are the asset now that the world has to create those proxy wars like I was talking about earlier when you had the one kingdom where the two brothers, and that's what's going on right now. You people today, we think today by modern advancements that like when America in the Revolutionary War, and then we had the War of 1801, the War of 1812, the War of 1815, World War I, people in America, the way we educate, assume that these wars came and they went and they're gone. They're not. All of these wars were just the long-standing for centuries of the continuation of the totalitarian regimes of the world in pursuit for world domination. The world totalitarians are in an alliance together with themselves, some of a unity that's intentionally set up, like I told you, where they know they have their own within running other little provinces or states within the area of theirs, and where they use each other as a proxy war, and they attack each other intentionally for the purpose of making sure they can keep each of the other ruler, when the people rebel against them, rising up and down as being the hero. This is all it's about. It's a game of chess for these people with our lives. And they've been playing this for thousands of years, and humanity to them is disposable assets. They're self-proclaimed elitist scumbags who just want to rule the world. And now, if it wasn't for America, eventually these people would come together and start to cannibalize each other, because in the end there can only be one world totalitarian ruler, right? That's the ultimate goal of all totalitarians, want to rule the world. But in the end, in truth, they won't. They'll keep it as it is because it's just as what they wanted it. They have that order now, which is known, everybody in theory right now, under the practice of thinking of like conspiracy theories, they say the New World Order. Let me tell you, there is no New World Order. It's the world order that's been now for thousands of years. And every one of these world rulers that exist right now, when you're talking like the dynasties of China, can be traced back 13,000 years. You look at Arabia, you look at Egypt, you look at India, you can trace these things back thousands of years. The world order has already been established a long time ago, and it still exists to this day. It's just that we have modernized, and right now people just don't even reflect on the history or see the pattern. But if you were to study all world history and cultures and religions, and you were to look at it from an outside perspective without anyone trying to manipulate you or get you to believe a certain thing, if you were to look at it blank mind and just be like, let me figure out what's going on like I did all my life, you would start to see the pattern of how it all formed. And you would understand that today is no different than 10,000 years ago. It's just we're a lot more modernized. But the dictators and the rulers of evil intent are still the very same people. And they're still doing the very same thing. And they have a world alliance. Today I laugh when when people say to me, I've had this thing with historians and people who are Americans, and they say we're allied with Great Britain. That's a lie. They say we're allied right now with China. That's a lie. They say we're allied with Arabia. That's a lie. These are our long-known, standing, declared enemies since the founding of this nation. Our founding fathers were very wise to the reality of these people being our enemies and why they're our enemies. And this is undeniable. This is just undeniable. But, people just, they can only go by what they learn. And what they're learning is not so much the truth. And the people are lazy and they don't want to take the time. And I'm trying to do this brief. I know this seems long, but I'm trying to do it in the briefest way possible to just kind of jar common sense of people, to get people to understand what I'm saying and try to put it together, those who can comprehend it and get it. The Ottoman Empire is the rise of an evil empire that has been now growing and dominating within, using itself as a proxy position against that by the world leaders that are in control. They just use Islam. Right now, if you were to look and you say, well, okay, what is the order of the world? You have the United Kingdom, which still has a queen. Canada still is like in that delusional thing of royalty with the queen. You have the Arabian royal family of a monarchy. You have the Egyptian royal family of a monarchy. You have the royal family of all the Ottomans of the Muslims, of the Muslim empires right now, and the Muslim states and nations that are all in monarchy with the royal families of Egypt and Arabia and Iran. And you have the dynasties of China. And all these people are using the Islamic Muslims. There's this alliance, they say, with Arabia, because Arabia now has a constitution outside of that of its constitution, which makes no sense. Because even its outside constitution of what it does to try and gratify the West here, us as idiots, and thinking that they have some kind of order of law equal to ours and what alliances are formed with us. In truth, that constitution is second to that of the true constitution, which is the Islamic Quran of Arabia. If you look at the Constitution of Arabia, it is under the law of that of the Quran is their constitution, and the Sharia is their law. And any other constitution of treaty establishment in order to form alliances with America is really under Tiaka, which is the right of deception, to be able to just make that work until they can overthrow this country. History proves this. Our founding fathers and our first administrations, first four administrations know this. But obviously the American government we're entrusting today and the idiots we have running our country today have forgotten these very important things. They don't pay attention to history and they're repeating it. And they're setting us all up for a great suffering in this country and a great fall. if we the people don't become aware of what I'm trying to explain to people right now about history. And it's very important that we do understand these things, because knowing who your enemy are is very, very important in this world if you want to live. We've only been here 244 years. We've been talking about dynasties and regimes and organizations of dictatorship, of totalitarian regimes that have existed for thousands of years. In America's 244 years, new in this world, and we think we know it all. When I got news for you, these people have been studying their practice for thousands of years, centuries upon centuries, and they have sustained their positions of power and authority over this world for centuries, because they know it well. They know what they're doing, and they know how to play on human nature, human emotion, natural occurrence of that, of human I don't know how to say it, maturity in their sexual progressions and what their urges are of natural instinct, and to play off the psychology of their mind and how to manipulate societies. And they're doing it well here with the indoctrination. As you can see, what's happening right now in America this very day is the same ancient principles and practices that end up targeting, like they did in Athens, Greece, like they did in Egypt when Babylon overthrew Egypt, like they did in Rome with overthrowing Rome, like Caesar's fall was falling into these perversions and the same things. And that's what I say. Every great rise and fall of a nation is related to and associated to that of what exactly is what I'm talking about. And that is the fact that, I'm just trying to fix something here, folks. Okay, here we go. The fact that they use, and when you look at it, you say, why did Caesar fall? Same thing, perversions. You look at Solomon, that falls in perversions. When you look at all rise and falls of great nations, Greece, the whole thing was homosexuality, freedom of sexual expressions, and weakness of that, tearing down the warrior of the man and the masculinity of the man. That was the fall of that. When you look at the fall, and then you look at the rises, and you say, well, how did things sustain? With Christianity being one of peace and what have you, we still had the era of the Christian Crusades, where the Muslims, on their attack, caused the rise of the Christian Crusades, and where Christian men had to put on the armor of God. Jesus even said there was a time when you would have to hammer the plowshare into a sword. Something along those lines. It's not verbatim. I'm just randomly here off of memory, kind of like the gist of it. But Jesus said you had two cheeks. After turning two cheeks, you got to turn to the sword. It's human nature that we would have a right to defend ourselves. And totalitarianism has also tried to manipulate Christianity in a way to further weaken the society it attempts to overthrow by holding it to that of the principles and values which they have had the church manipulate people to believe. Like you have the majority of Christian pastors and preachers and priests and ministers are cowards. These are coward men. They're not, and many of them, when you get to know them, you find out that they actually took the position of what they did because they're cowardly men. And, they don't ever want to face the conflict of a fist fight with a real man. So, they know they can be protected from that as a minister. I can't fight, I'm a minister. I can't take the violence, I'm a minister. And this weak man attitude of the preachers of Christianity is what led us to this weakness as Christians. And I'm going to tell you right now, the Christian Crusade shows a time of warriors of Christians, and that's who we are. We have a right to defend our right as Christians in this world and the followers of our Lord Jesus Christ and God. We have that right, and it is a self-evident right of what this nation was founded upon. We are the nation of Christians, of Christianity, and we're founded. Our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence is built upon the premise and the principles and the foundations of God. In the Declaration of Independence, it's stated as the great creator, each man's creator, and nature, and nature's God. And in our Constitution, which most people are unaware of, but eventually we're going to get to, you understand, the United States Constitution is ratified upon the name of our Lord, Jesus Christ. We're a Christian-founded nation. Our Constitution is established under Christian-founded principles. And I don't give a damn what any lawyer says. I can prove that by the Constitution itself. And anybody who reads the entire Constitution would know what I'm talking about. Sad part is I'm finding not many people ever read the whole Constitution, so they don't understand how the Constitution itself is ratified under our Lord Jesus Christ and how we are a Christian-founded nation. But that's the facts. And eventually, by the end, we're going to prove them facts, and we're going to show it. But what I'm saying is that we cannot allow ourselves, understand, you can love your enemy as Christ commands, and I get this. You can love your enemy. I love, because Muslims are human beings. And when you realize that the Islamic nations who right now, and then even the Chinese people, we know when we look at China and you look at Iran, Iran's a sad situation because Iran in 1978 was a free people like America. They were known as mini America. So if you want to know what it looks like to be a free nation like America that falls under the totalitarian rule of Islam, just look at Iran, because they were once a mini America. They were our allies before 1978. They were mini American people just like us, and now they're enslaved under the totalitarian Islamic regime over there because they've been overthrown. And we'll get to that as we move forward in the future, how that happened. But that's just a good example if you want to see what's going to happen here if we continue on the course we're heading. But like I'm saying, now Christians have the right to defend. You have two cheeks. You turn two cheeks to your enemy. And at that point, that's it. You only got two cheeks. There comes a point you have to stand your ground by your faith and your principle of actions by God to claim your self-evident right and stand to hold that right as God-given. Now, God has blessed America greater than any nation in world history that I've seen, and the American people. The sad part is the majority of Americans are, one, cowards. The other sad part is they don't really care. They're just self-serving, ignorant, no good, ungrateful people. That's a fact, people. That's a fact. And it's always been that way. The nation of America was founded by only 3% of the population. The other 97% could have gave a damn. They would have gone to their knees for King George III. They really didn't care. They're just self-serving people. As long as they're getting what they want and they're happy, they don't give a damn what happens to anybody in the world. And they make up the majority right now. That attitude exists with the American government. But we're gonna continue on with progressing forward in history here. Now, we had that rise with ancient Greece, and then we get to a point here where we start to see the pickup of man, first realizing now by the divinity of God that he has natural inalienable rights. And our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, our founding principles stem from a time of 1215. So you're talking 1777, right, from 1200. So you're talking like 500 years before the Constitution. Its seed was known as the Magna Carta. It was an order of free men. That was a treaty made with the kings, though the kings didn't care to honor it. But what happened was, like I said back before, in the ancient times, you had a genius who of good intent realized what was going on. He organized with that of the woodsman and that of the common man, and he got them strong enough organized to where they realized they could make a presence before the king, and the king would either have to submit to their will or go to war with them, and they were willing to go to war, and the king realized that, and he's like, okay, these guys aren't playing, can't play around. Okay, so what are we negotiating? And then he was willing to agree to the Magna Carta, but as we know, as history progressed, these kings did not keep to the treaty. They continued to attempt to overthrow it. They more aligned with that of an allegiance among themselves to overthrow it because they didn't want to give up their kingship. They didn't want to give up their royal court, their bishopness, and all these things that they evolved with totalitarianizing Christianity into the form of kingdoms of their monarchies with the elitist of the so-called royal, the ones who have special blood in them. This is ridiculous. All men are created equal. But these people, these self-proclaimed elitists, just can't accept that. But the Magna Carta was the first set route to that of a document that would start to outline the rules of a law and order that would defend that of the self-evident rights of humanity, was the Magna Carta. And then as we progress, like I say though, you had at this time too with the Christian Crusades, you had the Muslims, and but we still had God trying to work to give an enlightenment to people to the truth of understanding who we are as a humanity created entity of God and what his will is with us under our self-evident rights. And in all the ugly of the insanity of the evil in the world, God keeps persisting on trying to give us truth to follow and give us guidance. But like I say, we can't allow ourselves to be wimpanized by that of Christianity, by that of the weak, cowardly people who are now the ministers of it, who just, they're cowards. I've met many preachers of Christianity, and in speaking with them, I look at them and I realize they're cowards. Now, there are some that aren't, and they'll pretty much, they agree with me. There's preachers out there that are like, no way. No Christian has to take being humiliated, beat down, and have his head cut off and take that from anybody. But the majority who don't, oh, no, we don't want to be, because they're cowards. They're just coward men. They're not real men. They're just coward men. They're men who have been, they're coward in nature, I guess, and then they're further coward by that of the propagation of that of using Christianity in a sense to weaken that of the manhood. You know, these totalitarian regimes that have been ruling the world for thousands of years have learned the psychology of how to use everything that is against them against those who use it to try and defeat them. You know, and that's what this is. It's still a battle of good and evil in the world, and that's how it progresses. And I know a lot of people are wondering, you know, and we're getting up to it. These things all had to be understood in brief as possible, and that's what I did. It is in brief as possible to give you an understanding of realizing that the psychology that leads up to America has been long-standing for a written record of 13,000 years of nothing but evil geniuses and evil-natured, tyrant, disgusting, inhumane people who just cannot respect the self-evident of all people's rights, and that of good geniuses and strong, mighty men who, in recognizing the hardship and affliction of these people, have put on humanity now for thousands of years, who have the balls and the courage to rise up and stand against these men and try to establish that of an order in line with that of the laws of nature by nature's God, and where all men are created equal. And this is where we're getting to now. When we get to the point of where, you know, now understand, people are like, you know, Columbus didn't really, I don't care about stupid details. Everybody knows Columbus was not the first one to discover America, because when he got there, stupid, there were people there, okay? These arguments are all divisive nature. Don't get lost in the misdirective arguments that people are going to make when I'm making these videos about stupidity like that, you know, because this will be the point. Everyone will ignore all the importance of the things I'm trying to say to make the point of, you know, that's not right. Christopher Columbus did not discover America. That's a redirect of idiocy. Okay, this is what today's historians, lawyers, these so-called educated people of government and stuff, this is what they do. They confound you with these stupid little trivial things that common sense to any reasonable person would know. Of course we know Christopher Columbus did not discover it, like it was never found on the earth before. It was the first time that those of the continent he came from discovered it was here. I think everybody with common sense would know that. Right? It's not like he discovered it, like, you know, nobody in the whole world knew America was here until Christopher. No, that's not what they meant. They meant he was the first one out of the European countries that discovered it, okay? That's what they meant. It's common sense. Now, you know, it's idiocy. Then that idiocy is, like I say, don't let that derail from where we're going here. Now understand, the point I'm trying to make is when he realized that this land was here, and he went back and he told the people, in Great Britain at the time, the kingdoms of England or whatever was existing at the time, the kingdoms of Scotland, Ireland, and England at the time. You had the royal families all ruling there, and they were using Christianity in an attempt trying to totalitarianize their unity of rule. And understand too, the kingdoms, like I'm saying, all the way back in the time of the pharaohs, with them breaking up and using brothers over here and this one over here to do. The kingdoms of the time of what would form up and eventually become Great Britain, they were all in it together. They were not enemies. They were just playing enemies and proxy wars to keep themselves on a rise and a falls to maintain power among their people. Like if you had people in Scotland starting to rise up against the king because they didn't like his tyranny, well, England would attack them, and then that king would go ahead and assemble his army, and the people don't realize behind the king of England and the king of Scotland are both having, you know, tea over a game of chess, laughing at all the thousands of people out there stabbing each other with swords and fighting like crazy. And they're laughing about it because those people don't understand. They're in there having chess, playing chess, drinking tea together, and there's really no controversy between them. They just needed to get the attention attracted away from them. Because if the people were riding up against the king of Scotland, the whole war was initiated to take the attention off of him from the people trying to rebel against him, and to cause a war, so now the focus is on the war. And then the people are fighting. And eventually the game of chess comes down to where Scotland would say to the King of England, okay, you know, the war's gone on long enough. We pretty much wiped out all the people in that war that was rebelling against me. So now let us have a victory and you retreat, and I'll look like a hero. And that's what they would do. Be like, okay, game's over. I'll see you next week for tea again. We'll continue this chess game. Goes back, tells his commanders, retract this many men. They leave a weak position. That man's military conquers them. All the people are cheering now, the King of Scotland, hey, he's got victory, and they're running, and they're like, hey, we got victory. Next thing you know, there's a parade in the street, and everybody's celebrating the guy that just a couple months ago they wanted to hang. You get it? That's how it's been going on for a long time. These people have been playing us for fools, and they've been playing for fools for a long time, thousands of years. This is the game of chess been being played with humanity. This is what's going on right now. And that's what I say. Great Britain is no ally to ours. Egypt is no ally to ours. Arabia is no ally to ours. These people are of that world order that's been long-standing with China, all of them. The only ones that aren't involved right now, and some people are going to go, oh, I'll tell you right now, Russia's not involved. You see, Russia has been an enemy of the world order for a long time because they've always sought their own independence. And that's the alliance America's had with them, because when we look at the founding of America, in the Revolutionary War up to all the wars that we have ever had, Russia has always been an ally with America. Because we're unified in an alliance in one thing, nationalism. Nationalism. That of our right to be who we are, sovereign, and that of our own borders, as a people by our own culture and values. Nationalism that's what unifies Russia with America in an alliance that has been allied to each other in every war that's been in the world since the time America has risen. And history shows that. The Democrats don't like to admit that, but that's a fact. Russia has been our ally in every war that we have fought as the American people, in the alliance of that of our nationalism. And also India is not involved. India is a massive nation that has always sought its own independence and sovereignty for thousands and thousands of years. Their ideology dates back as far as China's to 13,000, 14,000 years ago. And they have always been in pursuit of that of a kind of republic, with that of, two, dealing with the issues of many false and insane mythical religions and what have you, that have been the confounding thing that has led them to be constantly in an up and rising, up and down fall for thousands and thousands of years. Of what's right now in this world, all are under the attack of the jihad of the Islamic Muslims. And it's not that the world wants Islam to take over the world. They just use the Islamic sects as that of the tyrannical army and military to do the upset and cause the chaos and insanity of what is going on in the world right now. They're the people who instill the fear, do the terrorism, and force all the cowards to comply. And that's what's going on right now. But we're going to continue on. Like I say, I just wanted to get to the point. Why would everybody, well, when you get to America, and we see America, and you see people literally, when you think back in this time, when we go back to the time here like 1492, right around here going into that time, and you say to yourself, okay, he found this, then people literally got in boats, went across a void of an ocean. They had never gone on a boat trying to get to this land. Why? Well, the truth of the matter is something that's not taught, and it's not taught intentionally, because the truth would end a lot of the divisiveness in America, a lot of the racial issues in America, and it would more or less gear us toward being the unified people who we were intended to be. You see, they have to distort the facts of the truth. Like you see right now, you got Joe Biden saying we choose truth over facts. This is a totalitarian ideology approach, and what it means is that if you can teach a posterity a truth and hide the facts that prove that truth is a lie, they will believe it to be the truth. And that's what's happening right now with the American posterity. They're being deceived by a lie that's being claimed to be the truth. And the facts are being hidden from them. And they're being directed and indoctrinated not even to consider the facts or believe the facts. And this is a communist practice that's been long-standing. And, it changes in different names. They call it fascist now, communism, Nazism, this, that. All these different names are just to mask the long-standing. They're still what they've always been. These are practices that have been around for ancient times, being used in the psychology of humanity. And all these names are just new derivatives that try and direct you away from seeing the pattern in history, if anyone was to study world history. But I'm telling you right now, don't fall for the propagation of all the different terms and meanings and titles given to these things. Just see them on the basic common sense of what they are, and realize these have been long-standing practices of divisiveness in order to keep people fighting with each other, so they're not looking at the government. You see, that's what it's all about. It's the whole thing. It's just, nothing changes in the human nature and the process of these things. And it's not very complex when you take and you've studied the entire 13,000 years and you put it down, you look at it with a clear, open mind of no bias, no favor for anybody, just wanting to see the truth. You see the truth for what it is. And the reason why people were fleeing to America and willing to risk their lives like they did was because of the tyrannical state of the world. The evil of this world with the dictators, slavery. Every nation was indulging in slavery. Mind you that, like the black African slave trade actually goes back to the Ottoman Muslim Empire. It started in 640, 650 A.D. And that's 1,200 years before America even comes to be what it is today, the United States. It's like 1,300 years before we even existed. There was the Islamic Muslims who founded the black African slave trade. But prior to the black African slave trade, for all those thousands of years prior, was white slavery. And just because they started with the black African slave trade with the Muslims in 640 AD doesn't mean white slavery ended, because you know what? The Islamic Muslims as well enslaved white Christians and white Jews and anybody who was white that was not a Muslim. And in the world itself, around the world, there was way more white slaves than there were black African slaves. But in the evolution of time to where it comes up onto America's founding, where we get to the, like in here even, I got recalling Africa's harrowing tale of its first slaves, the Arabs, as UK slave trade abolishes is commemorated. But you see, the Muslims were the primary provider of black African slaves to the world slave trade. They were dominant because they invaded North Africa in 640 AD and then enslaved the entire black race under their Muslim regimes. The only people they actually converted to Islam would be the tribal leaders, so that they can gain favor with them to literally rile up their own people by the herds of shiploads and allow them to chain them up and take them and sell them as slaves. So understand, and that was going on for a long time before America even existed. And white slavery still existed as well. One of the other reasons was you had some of the kings of England, Scotland, and Ireland. They didn't want black African slaves in their country unless they were eunuchs, and that was something that the Muslims would accommodate, like they did in Morocco and what have you. They literally would castrate the black men, so there would be no chance of interracial breeding going on. But and that's out of the racism of what's the racist whole principle of races on color of people was founded as well with Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. He is the father of racism, like Andrew Johnson is the father of rhinos. And so that's just a fact of history, the way it goes, and we'll get into that, because these things are all going to have to be disclosed and reviewed and considered to understand where our founders came from. Now, these people were fleeing. When you would say, well, if England, Scotland, and Ireland was so great, and Europe was so great, and like today's idiocy with the racism thing, if white was so great back then, why would they leave? Why would they risk their lives going across north? I'll tell you why. Because in Ireland and Scotland, you had massive slave herding going on among the common Irish and Scottish that were being put into the copper and brass mines and worked to death like they were disposable assets, no different than what the Ottoman Muslims did with Christian slaves who were white, or black African slaves who were just tribal people that didn't honor Islam. They would work you to death as disposable assets. The most of the slaves being used in the white European nations were slaves for labor, mining, farming, what have you, and it would be an order set up, kind of like what eventually was set up in in Americas with the black African slave trade in the southern districts controlled by the Tories, and where it was kind of an order of a labor factory kind of process day in and day out, and but the Islamic Muslims now, they had different intent for the African slaves and the white slaves. Most of the white slaves they saw were white women for sex slaves. The men were more of a servant kind of slave. The white men were not good for military service because they usually would commit treason and join the other side at any opportunity they could. The black African slaves were tribal people who really weren't aware yet of world cultures outside of Africa, and they had no allegiance or alliance. They didn't understand the world workings, as where most of the white slaves that were captive under the Ottomans or the Muslims at the time would have had knowledge of other cultures and values of where they came from. And usually it would be the Muslims fighting that of one of the cultures they knew that they could be free in again if they were to commit treason and go back over the other side. So they were not used very much for war in that sense because of their knowledge of the world. The African tribal people had no knowledge of the world outside that, and they were used for war. They would pack and stack the front lines of the Muslim armies with the black African slaves, and literally by the tens of thousands, and just have them run in to exhaust out of the nation they were trying to overthrow, the army they were facing, until they exhausted that army with the lives of all these tens of thousands of African slaves. And then eventually, once the Africans were able to weaken that defense to where the Muslims felt they could run in now and look like the heroes and beat everybody, After after that, then they would run in and healthy, strong, all Muslims able. Most of the army's already been wiped out by the African slaves, and they go in and they play like they're great warriors. But the true history of Islam shows nothing but the leaders being coward men. The military and the militant indoctrinated people, though, that's another story. They're not cowards at all. These are warrior spirited people who are indoctrinated from the time they're born, and they have, like the Japanese of the kamikaze during World War II, they have no favor whatsoever for life. They don't have a fear of death at all, and they're indoctrinated with the insanity of ideological, religional beliefs and culture that make them seek death more than they do life. So, I mean, it's a crazy situation that we're facing. But the cause of everybody trying to get to America was to escape this insanity of the world with all these world tyrants and self-proclaimed dictators and demigods and supreme rulers who are just enslaving humanity everywhere and treating humanity as if they were disposable assets, no different than a gerbil or a mouse. The hardship of people was to be just enslaved and labored all day long for that of the grace of the kings and the superior rulers, who were make up a very small percentage of the world of these people who had the power of these great armies that would afflict people if they didn't obey. And you could go here and you could get away from that. That was the hope. It was a vision to get away from that. So people started traveling across this continent. Now, I'm jumping here a little bit ahead to the Declaration of Independence, but because it took hundreds of years under British rule of America, and then America was also ruled by many. It was Spain had a large possession of America. They owned Florida. They owned sections out west. Spain was people who actually exterminated the Inca tribal people because the Queen Isabella felt that people who participated in cannibalism or human sacrifice were disposable assets. And they had the Inquisition. Everybody remembers the Christian Inquisition, that you had to be a Christian, Catholic, or what have you. These were all methods, again, used from ancient time and trying to use Christianity to totalitarianize that of government rule. But the Incas were literally extinct by the Spaniards, and the American Indians were the runoffs of the actual Inca. When you look into the West area and Central Americas with the American Indians, they were the outcast of the Inca, or people who were just fled out into what was known as the wilderness in their time, trying to escape being a human sacrifice, what have you. They would just get on a horse and run, and you can't blame them. Eventually, they became the tribes of the American Indians. There's also evidence by DNA of what we know today. At some point, people from Japan were here way before Columbus, and they somehow integrated with that of the outcast of the Incas, because the DNA shows a matchup between the Japanese people and that of the American Indians. And there's always been a fascination of some kind of a tie between the Japanese, always knowing somehow that this happened. And there is some history that is recently being revealed about travelers and the potential of how that came about, and how people may have came here and got stuck here or stayed behind here with the American Indians before Columbus even arrived. But, those things are left to speculation right now until the facts come to light to what they are. But the reason that everybody was coming to America was to escape the tyranny of the world. It was such a horrible world that it was more likely better to risk dying going across what seemed to be an infinite sea to an unknown land than to stay where you are. That's how horrible it was. When you look back at some things, I don't know if I can get this up. I might be able to get it up here. Let's see. Comes up, yeah, here it goes. So this is White Slave, African Master. This was a book that was written as that people don't understand too, that the black African tribal leaders and the African people themselves were able to take white Christian slaves before America even existed, and there was black slavery here. This is one other thing here. And then also I have another book which I can't pull up. I'm trying to pull up, but it seems to be glitching right now. But it's a book about the Irish and Scottish slaves in Great Britain, and how Queen Isabella had witnessed how they were being worked to death and how little value they had. And it's written in these books that were written in that time about the slave trade going on with the Irish and the Scottish by the kings of Great Britain, and how they were so inhumane that these people would be down in the subterranean steel and brass and copper mines working, and they'd work them to death, and when they died, they weren't even worth bringing back up for their family to have a decent burial with them. They would just tell the other slaves, dig a hole down there and just bury him. And the stench of death that came out from the mines was what hit the Queen Isabella when she seen these mines. And there's things where she wrote about these things in letters to give you an idea of just the inhumanity that existed back in that time. Imagine you have these mines, and literally they're described as tunneled graveyards, because the stench of death from so many dying in there and being buried would reek out through the tunnels, and you could smell the death and all around these mines. And the kings, and they didn't care. They just wanted the brass, the copper, and they didn't care about the people. They work them to death, men, women, and children. They just work them to death. They really didn't care. And children as well were preferable because they were small. It required less labor because you didn't have to dig as big a tunnel for children. So they used children for mining more so desired than that of adults. And they would work all adults, men, women, or children to death. These people were inhumane in that time. And all of those in the copper, brass, and mining of Great Britain in that time were white slaves, because the kings didn't want any black slaves brought into their nation. They only traded in the black slave trade to sell them to other nations. And the same held true with China or Morocco areas and stuff like that. If they did take in black slaves, they insisted they'd be eunuchs, they'd be castrated, so there was no chance of interbreeding with them. And that's just the way it went. But even during the time of when America was founded, and we get to the point of even here where the Declaration of Independence comes about, and then this is where we're going to end today's series, because then we're going to get into about the rising of America and why it happened. But the reason where we're ending off is that people came here because the world around here was so horrible, so inhumane, and the long-standing reign of thousands of years of these totalitarian regimes, of these dictators, demigods, and supreme rulers who just sought as a goal to rule the world and enslave all of humanity under their control. And they had no humanity in them whatsoever for anybody but themselves. And it was a horrible, horrible world. When you look at the truth of things, of which we'll start back off on the next video on this, about how they would control people, what they would do, how they had these tombs of spikes. They would stretch people, tear them in half, have horses tie their hands and legs, tear them in half, hang them in public, behead them in public, you name it. The horrors that they would inflict were, and mind you, these things still to this day go on in these totalitarian regimes that many Americans are not even aware of, to how primitive still in nature many of these foreign cultures that still adhere to these foreign totalitarian ideologies still practice the very same things in this very modern and considered to be civilized world today. But for today, we're going to leave off with this, arriving to the point to why people are coming to America. I hope everybody enjoyed the video up to this point. If you want to comment below, if you have done any kind of research, you want to add to anything in the evidence of things I'm saying, you can put them in the comments box below. And hopefully, like I said, this is the first video of a series going into from the approach to America, and then we're going to go through who we are as Americans, how we evolved to be Americans, and what our plan and goal of our founders were, and that of the true American principles and values of our ideology as the American people. So thank you all for watching my video, and I will see you next time on the next video. The next video is actually not going to be related to this. It's something I got to say about the state of America today. But we will continue on with the history videos as well until we cover all the history. And we're going to get into as well, when we progress in this, who the Democrats are, who the Republicans are, and what have you. So I just ask everybody to be patient. It'll be a series of videos, and I hope these videos are here that people can use these to help teach that of their children the truth of our nation's history and who we are as the American people and why we're the greatest nation in the world. So again, thank you all for your time, and I'll see you on the next video. Have a great day.